I want to talk about corsets and feminism. I touched on this a little bit in my Women of History video, but I didn't talk about corsets explicitly, so I want to talk about that right now. And I want to start with Emma Stone, or not Emma Stone, the other Emma, Emma Watson. Now first, let me say, I have nothing against Emma Watson personally. I think that what she's done to help empower women, at least I think she's done that, I'm not actually sure. I've heard that she's done a lot to empower women, and I think that's great and wonderful. But she has done some things that I really do not approve of, and those really relate to corsetry. In the Beauty and the Beast movie that she was in whenever that was, my understanding was she did not want her, princess dress to have a corset involved because that was not feminist. Now, I think that that is a very dangerous mindset because that implies that it goes back to this idea that women are weak, and that these are the corset is this kind of male-imposed garment, which it's not. Quite frankly, corsets were developed by, it's actually, I don't want to say that corsets were developed by women. We don't really know who invented the corset since they've been around for such a long time. We can, however, say that corsets were made fashionable by women. Really, the first time when you see corset-like garments appearing is in the mid-16th century in England and France. It's really thought that Elizabeth I of England, who is my personal hero, was the person who made corsets fashionable, or she wouldn't have called it a corset, she would have called it a pair of bodies. But it's thought that she was the one who brought these corset-like garments into fashion and made them fashionable. Catherine de Medici, who was the Queen Regent of France, and who is very famous, said in the late 16th century that the ideal measurement for a woman's waist was 10 inches, which is absolutely absurd. But these were women saying this. These were not men saying this. The writings against corsets that we have from the 19th century, and we do have a lot of writings against corsets from the 19th century, they're all from men. I cannot find any writings against corsets by women. I'm sure there are a few. I have not been able to find them in any of the books that I have. I collect antique medical books. I collect antique books in general, but I love antique medical books. And one of them is called, I can't remember what it's called, but one of them is about how to reduce flesh without diet or apparatus, essentially. So it's a book of exercises, and the author, whose name also escapes me, but it is a man, writes that he is unusual in that he thinks that women are of equal capacity to men, both mentally and physically. And that's all very well and good, but he writes, in the chapters that he's written specifically for women, he writes in a way that he's really, really talking down to his audience, and he's treating his female readers like children. And if you guys want me to, I can read you some of the passages from this book that I'm talking about. I don't want to make you sit through those if you're not interested. But if you want me to, I can do that some other time. But he really, really talks down to women. And then he talks about how corsets are so bad. And he doesn't really back his claims up with any science. He just kind of says that they're bad and expects women to believe him. And then another book that I have from that same time, that's pretty much, it says that it's the same situation, is that the author really, really talks down to women and says, corsets are terrible, take my word for it, and we will move on now. There was a woman in the 1890s, I cannot remember her name, but she essentially said all of these doctors are who've never examined a woman are coming in and saying that these garments are unhealthy. If corset makers were to go and start telling the doctors how to do their jobs, the doctors would, of course, scoff them out of the building. These doctors do not know what corsets do to women's bodies because they're not examining us, and they don't know how corsets work. So they don't know what they're talking about in this case. Oftentimes, the writings against corsets were not for the sake of health. They were for the sake of morality and religion. Two men who really did not like the wearing of corsets were Kellogg and Graham of Kellogg's cereals and the Graham cracker. These two men were quite absurd. They invented Kellogg cereals and the Graham cracker as a way of curbing lustfulness. The original recipes for graham crackers and cornflakes were cardboard, essentially. They were undigestible because they thought that rich foods inflamed your I don't want to elaborate any further. You can catch my drift. And they wrote against corsets because they did not take a medical tack. They didn't say these are unhealthy. They said these make women look too sexy. So that was their reason for disliking corsets. So all of the literature that's teaching us, that's telling us to dislike corsets, is coming from men. And the idea that women, again, I'm going to kind of reiterate what I said in my other video. The idea that wearing a corset is not feminist, I think, is really dangerous because it implies that women are weak. To accept that, you also have to accept that women, for a majority of recorded Western history, were weak enough to be forced into a place of servitude. And that is just not true. Women are not that weak. I also think it's very dangerous from a modern standpoint to say that wearing a corset or wearing anything is not feminist, because it starts to limit who can be feminist. By that logic, I would not be a feminist because I wear a corset and I wear long skirts. And I consider myself to be a feminist, and I think that saying, oh, well, this type of garment is not feminist, is a really exclusionary thing to do, and I think that it puts women down. It puts down historical women and it puts down modern day women, and I do not like that. I don't like putting anybody down, but I really don't like women putting other women down. I think women need to stick together, and I think that saying that wearing a corset is not feminist really just puts down historical women, and it closes out modern day women, and it also puts forward this idea that it doesn't have to stop at corsets being unfeminist. You can say, oh, well, you're wearing makeup, that is not feminist because you're doing it for a man. You're wearing high-heeled shoes, that's not feminist. You're not allowed to be part of our group. And it sets up this very exclusionary mindset that I think is not safe, and that's not the kind of message that I want to be sending. Now I want to talk about Emma Stone, the other Emma, because she also has said some things about corsets in relation to her role in The Favorite, which was a wonderful movie. I absolutely loved that movie, although I had a little bit of a problem with the way they portrayed Queen Anne. I'm going to go off on a little bit of a tangent, because Queen Anne, Anna Gloria, she's kind of gone down in history as sad Queen Anne, which she has a right to. They were right, she did lose 17 children. They made her seem quite stupid and dopey in that movie, and while she certainly was not a very self-possessed person, she wasn't Elizabeth I, for example. She was an interim monarch. She was the last of the Stuarts, and she knew that. And she knew that she didn't have any surviving heirs. So she knew that she was a placeholder and everybody was just waiting for her to die so they could move on with the Hanover line. But in spite of that, she genuinely did her best for her country, and that's something that I think that the movie did not show. She did genuinely want to help her country, and she did genuinely love her country. And I think the movie kind of doesn't show that. But other than that small criticism, I thought the movie was wonderful. Emma Stone made, in an interview, said that she recommends that no matter how historically accurate they are, you should always skip the corset for your costume, because she found it to be incredibly uncomfortable. She said that she had to, when she was wearing her well, at that point in time it would have been called either stays or bodies, I'm not quite sure what. When she was wearing her stays for the movie, she had to think of wide open spaces and smell menthol to keep from, essentially, I don't know what she was trying to keep from doing, either throwing up or having a claustrophobic attack. She didn't really specify. But again, I think that is not the best sort of information to be spreading, and I don't want to discount her experiences, because perhaps not even perhaps, I don't want to say that she's lying. I'm sure she did have a very uncomfortable experience. I can also say that she was clearly laced down quite a bit, and she mentioned that was her first time ever wearing a corset. So it's, I know, like in the summers, I don't often, when I'm doing something in which I can't wear historical clothing for a long period of time, be it an internship or what have you, and then I go back to wearing historical clothing, it's pretty uncomfortable for the first week or so, because I'm used to having, my natural waist is between 30 and 32 inches, and my corseted waist is 25 inches. So I'm lacing myself down between 5 and 7 inches, which when I'm used to it is fine. But when I haven't done it for several months, it's really, really uncomfortable to start doing that again and to go all the way back down, to lace myself down 7 inches. It's much more comfortable to let your body adjust. So it seems to me that if Emma Stone had never worn a corset before, and then she was laced down dramatically for The Favorite, that would have been very uncomfortable for her. It's also possible that corset was not specifically sized for her. Again, I keep on saying corset, that's not the correct terminology for the early 18th century, but I'm just going to keep on going with it. So if she had never, so it's on the set of a major movie. It seems unlikely that the costume designer would be able to custom make every single undergarment to fit everybody. And of course she was one of the leading characters, so maybe she had a different circumstance, but it seems possible to me, at least, that her corset was not made to measure. So that could be why she had those very painful experiences. But I think that it's it's not good to spread this kind of misinformation about these corsets being so incredibly unhealthy and these torture devices, because again, it really does take away from women of the past, and taking away from women of the past takes away from women of the present. That's really what I want to get to, is if you degrade women of the past, you degrade women of the present, because women are women no matter when they are. And look at all of the absolutely incredible things that women in the past did while wearing corsets. The first woman to climb the Matterhorn did so, not only was she wearing not only was she wearing a corset, she was wearing a hoop skirt while she climbed the Matterhorn. Nellie Bly did all of her Nellie Bly stuff while wearing a corset. In fact, she went to some suffrage meetings, and she was shocked that some of the suffragettes were not wearing their corsets. She heavily criticized some suffragettes for not wearing corsets. So I think that it's very I think that it's a dangerous rhetoric to engage in. And I think that it's also, I don't want to say, oh, these women are you know, who are anti-corset are victims of the patriarchy, but, and I'm not saying they're victims of the patriarchy, but they are falling for the patriarchal propaganda that was written by men. And oftentimes these, like, Kellogg and Graham did not have very good views of women. They had some very, very regressive views of women's rights. And to just take what they wrote about corsets and to discard everything else, I think is not acceptable. So if you're taking what they wrote about corsets, then am I making myself clear? I don't know. I feel like I'm pretty garbled. I was really excited to talk about this yesterday, and I had like a very eloquent thing all planned out, and now I can't really tell what I am talking about. Women who say, oh, the corsets are so terrible and blah, 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 they're falling for propaganda that was written by men, is what I'm trying to say. And they are letting men control their wardrobe, which is not something that I want to do. I want to choose what I wear for myself. And I think that everybody should be able to do that. And I believe I have made my point. I'm going to link to Carolina Zabraska's video down below, how men taught us to hate corsets, because I think she probably did a better job of explaining this than I did, but I did want to just put in my own 2 cents about the issue. So yes, that's that. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.